After the events of Hitman Absolution, from the outside looking in as a fan, the situation looked dire. Layoffs, cancelled projects, and failed sales expectations meant that IO was not in a good position. Not to mention the feeling of disappointment felt by fans due to the complete departure of what made the series so special with the release of Absolution. It was going to take some work to win back the fans. I'll admit that I was extremely skeptical reading their open letter that the next game would be a return to form, bigger and better than ever. But I am more than happy to say that IO came back swinging and hit it out of the park with Hitman 2016.
I think they called me 47.
That's not a name.
So make it one.
All right. Agent 47.
When going into making Hitman 2016, their goal was to make a successor to Blood Money that the fans had always wanted. This was quite the tall order, and it was going to be a major uphill battle for them as they hadn't made a sandbox game in over 10 years, and that was on their previous engine. Outside of development issues, the next large hurdle was to win fans over with their new format. This time around, IO wanted to experiment with how their game could be packaged, having a smaller and cheaper entry point to get more customers in at the start, and then once they had them hooked on the content given, they'd be able to convert this to more purchases than they ever would have been able to with a complete $60 game. And then once everything was all said and done, for those who wanted the full package at $60, they would be able to buy it. In theory, this would allow IO to have less work up front, so they wouldn't have to crunch and could plan and space things out better, while also getting funds to further keep the game and the studio afloat, while also listening to feedback from people with the releases of previous content and improving the next release. Killer Instinct had a similar idea and approach with how they tried to revolutionize how games could be sold in a way that both makes fans and developers happy, allowing people to download the game for free and using whatever free character was on rotation. Then after they played it, if they enjoyed it, they can buy any character they want for $5 without having to pay $60 to just play as one character. So if you say liked Saberwolf, all you had to do was buy Saberwolf, and then you technically own the entire game. But if you are familiar with Killer Instinct, you'll have already known the public's response. Now, while there wasn't anything wrong with the format because it would allow players to get what they wanted without having to commit $60, it was marketed in the most confusing way possible that it was doomed to fail. As a fan of both Killer Instinct and Hitman, and even a supporter of this format, if your initial announcement leaves people confused and requires explanations and infographics that explain what people will get and for how much, it's never going to work, and people will think you're trying to nickel and dime them. It also doesn't help that the format of release was changed from its original plan after the game was delayed from its December 8th, 2015 release date to March 11th, 2016. The original plan was to release half the game for $35, giving the players the first 3 locations while IO worked on the other 3, which could be bought for another $30 once it was complete. Or if you wanted, you could pay $60 up front and receive all the content as it was coming out, with a physical version being released once everything was all said and done. In January 2016, IO would then announce that they were shifting the game to be fully episodic, now having the launch in March come with just the prologue and the first location, Paris, for $15. The other 2 locations that were planned to come in the intro pack would then come out in April and May, and the other 3 locations would come out later in 2016. I'm not sure if it's just because how few studios actually attempt this format, but episodic games always seem like a hard sell to players. Unless your name was Telltale or Don't Nod at the moment, I really can't name any other studio that is doing episodic games and have them actually be successful. It's also an even harder sell on the episodic format when what came before it wasn't. And while I can't say for sure that this was a factor, I would imagine how famous Kickstarters and early access games had turned out before this would have also poisoned the proverbial well. I bet most of you watching right now can think of at least 5 to 10 early access or Kickstarter games that were abandoned for one reason or another, or that the final product when everything was all said and done was a major letdown. Now, is it fair for people to assume IO would do the same? No, but I can't really blame people for being wary and skeptical after being burned so many times. After the format change came the next difficult sell, a tough pill to get consumers to swallow: always online. Due to some of the features we'll get into in just a bit, the game required a constant connection to the internet in order to really experience the game. While offline you were still able to play the game, it would gate off a ton of content and progression. Eventually they would make content already unlocked available to be accessed when offline in an update in November 2016, but progression and items still locked was something they seem to have a firm stance on. I love this game, I really do, but this is one thing I cannot and will not defend. I do not understand why they can't just gate off the actual content that requires the internet connection when offline and not the progression system as a whole. We have seen it time and time again that always online is not a viable option. It never works at launch when you're going to have the most traffic to your game. People just simply do not have stable connections in large parts of the world, even in places like North America and Europe. Your core audience's location, and worst of all, servers aren't permanent. Just look at Absolution. The servers for that went down in 2018, so you can no longer play the contracts mode in that game. It is a legitimate worry and fear about the preservation of people's games they bought with their hard-earned money. The amount of games that are unplayable now due to delisting, servers going down, or legal disputes is immeasurable. This is not a baseless fear. Just earlier this year, when the pandemic lockdown started and everyone began working from home, the internet was by far the slowest and most inconsistent it's ever been. It was a legitimate problem for the entire world, and during this period, this game was simply unplayable. Me and a bunch of friends around the world just could not play this game because our connections would just go out due to the influx of traffic and strain on our ISPs. To add to everything working against this game came the last thing to leave a sour taste in fans' mouths: system exclusive content. That's right, the PS4 version of this game has an entire extra campaign of 6 targets, which the Xbox and PC never got. I cannot comment on the quality of this exclusive content as I own the PC version, and I see no reason to buy a PS4 version just for this. When your game is centered around assassinating Bond-esque villains, gating an entire 6-part story, even if it's taking place in the already existing locations, is not going to make fans of your game happy. In fact, it will probably turn off people from buying it, since they will perceive this as getting a worse deal if they are on other platforms. This content is also locked to a now out-of-date version of this game, since you can play all of Hitman 2016 and Hitman 2, but according to the wiki, these missions aren't carried over to the PS4 version of Hitman 2. Realistically, this was probably a decision made by executives at Square Enix or Sony, and this was a deal in order to get extra money for IO. Like I said earlier, in spite of everything working against this game, it came out amazing. It really is the love letter to the series I always wanted, celebrating its history with a montage of iconic kills from previous titles, and even references Absolution. When I talk about giving your players options to tune the game to how they want to experience it, this is the game that comes to mind, allowing for as much guidance or lack thereof as you want. This game feels like a proper modernization of the original game's formula. Sandbox levels have made a triumphant return, along with being larger than ever. The level structure is where the largest divergence come from with this reboot. Instead of small to medium-sized sandbox levels that take place in varying locations around the world, this game has 6. Where the game lacks in location numbers, it makes up for with how content-rich each of these 6 locations are. Each target has multiple opportunities to follow. These are pre-constructed ways to kill your target. You can select which one of these to follow or overhear it from NPCs in the overworld. If you find that these are way too handholdy, you can just turn off opportunity markers in the settings and simply rely on figuring everything out for yourself or relying on what people say, then try to go from there without a waypoint. This is the right way to do accessibility and difficulty in my opinion, not to simplify the game's system and mechanics, but give players more help and guidance if they need it, and if they don't want it, then the game isn't too cryptic so they can turn off all the hand-holding and figure everything out for themselves. Challenges have made their return, but they are far more varied this time around due to the openness of this game. Sure, there are still some of the generic ones for each mission, but almost all of these challenges are unique and out there, with only a few that don't give you an idea of what the game wants you to do and just say redacted. But even then, most of those are fine since they're usually Easter egg oriented, but as a result, people are just going to look them up online. Progression was something really focused on for this game, with each location addition comes location mastery. You gain points for completing challenges, opportunities, and overall how well you did through a playthrough of a mission. As you level up, you'll unlock new equipment to use and starting locations. With the return of mission planning comes the ability to choose how you start an assassination. With higher mastery of a level comes new starting locations with different disguises. So for example, you can start a level as a waiter or a chef or a guard, opening the floodgates to the variety of ways you can approach a kill. Sadly, the only flaw with this progression system is a major one, and it's that it's tied to being always online. If your connection goes out mid-mission, your options are to just lose all of your progress, requiring you to either exit out or just keep playing the mission knowing that you're going to get no rewards for completing any challenges or opportunities. Or you could sit around waiting, hoping that your connection comes back while you're looking at a menu attempting to reconnect. Like I said earlier, it wasn't till November of 2016, nearly 8 months after the game had been already out, did it allow players to play a partial offline mode, allowing them to use previously unlocked things while offline. So before the update, you were basically set back to level 1 if you ever played offline. Since planning is back, so are loadouts, allowing you to select your pistol, your clothes, your equipment, and a smuggled in item in ICA crates. While I'm very happy that loadouts are back, I think they are too small this time around. You only get 2 equipment slots, and things like the lockpick are now an equipment that you need to opt into taking. You are no longer defaulted with the fiber wire, poison, sedative, mine, and coin like in Blood Money. I find it ends up being too restrictive, and because of it pushes me away from using certain items like the fiber wire in favor of something that's more all around applicable, like the lockpick. I really wish they had either given us more slots or made things like the fiber wire and lockpick not take up one of said slots, so you'd be free to use some of the more out there items like the phone bombs without feeling like you're limiting your options without them. The other issue with loadouts is that the briefcase didn't return for this game, so you can only get sniper rifles from the ICA pickups, and you have to carry it on your back, so if you're not dressed as someone who is fine with openly carrying a large caliber rifle, then you will be drawing a lot of attention to yourself, and will end up probably leaving the item behind when you are done with a level. I'm not entirely sure if this goes towards leading evidence or not, if you exit a level without taking the rifle with you, but if it does, I am not a fan of this. Syringes have made a return, but this time around you can only seem to stab people with them, and poisoning drinks and food is either now context sensitive or requires a different item. This is why I wish we had more equipment slots, or some defaulted to come with 47, since it always feels like it's out of the way in an unsatisfying way to use these syringes and poisons. The map has also made a return, but this time around it's not in real time. While I like the map we got, I think it would have been really cool to give the players the option to choose between a real-time map and a paused map, but due to the size of these levels and the amount of moving parts, maybe it didn't work in testing and that's why we only have the paused one. You still can't tell if an area is restricted, so for some areas without signs or guards to tell you to leave, if you open the door and take a single step inside, you will get spotted for trespassing. And since looking through keyholes hasn't come back, this is the same issue Absolution had. I really wish they made the map have restricted areas highlighted in red depending on the disguise you were in. If there is a way to tell on the map, I'm honestly missing it, unless the game just really wants you to use instinct, which I prefer not to. At the very least, saving and loading is back, so if you do fuck up and get caught trespassing, while annoying, you can still reload a save or an autosave instead of being at the mercy of checkpoints. If you're a fan of my channel and have watched other videos of mine, you'll often notice how I give a seemingly cop-out answer at the end of reviews saying, I hope/wish we'd see a sequel to insert game here to see if they can refine and improve some of their systems or mechanical ideas, because with player feedback and some more experimenting, they could make them good. This game is the reason why I always say this. In Hitman Absolution, using disguises sucked due to having the horrible instinct meter and having everyone being able to see through your disguise, unless you were rubbing the back of your head like you were embarrassed or tipping your fedora. It basically pushed players to never interact with one of the most iconic gameplay systems of the series. For this game, they could have easily just dumped the idea completely and went back to how it worked in Blood Money, but instead they thought, well, we have a good foundation, let's just tweak it a bit till it's better, instead of everybody being able to see through your disguise, only a select few of people who are in charge can. The game justifies it pretty well, and even as a player you can just think to yourself, oh, well, maybe the basic workers and soldiers might not recognize a new face, but a manager or a leader would. It's a happy middle ground of the original idea, so players can still freely use disguises, but there is still an added layer so you aren't just mindlessly running around. It still has some of those semi-immersion breaking moments, like when you get told that the target has handpicked all of his crew members so he will see through your disguise, but since blending in is back, you can completely slip under his nose by standing in front of this mini drink bar. The only thing I think is really missing from this game is a hideout where you can mess around with all of your equipment. It was one of my favorite features from Silent Assassin through Blood Money, but without it, I don't ever really see myself using any of the more aggressive weapons. Like, to this day, I still have not used an assault rifle. I have no idea how they feel like in this game. I also wish they brought back the feature where you got to keep weapons you exited the mission with, so you'd be able to use previous targets' unique weapons in future hits. Your main story targets aren't your only missions this game has to offer. Escalations work similar to the contract missions you could find in Absolution and in this game, but like the name implies, they get more and more complex as you finish levels. So at first they may need you to kill a target with a specific weapon, but then in the following level, you'll need to kill them in a certain disguise, and then the level after that, you'll have some restrictions like if you go into a certain disguise, you will auto-fail the level. These are personally not my cup of tea, but there are a bunch of them, so there is no shortage of side content. The other side content and the whole reason for the always online aspect of this game is the elusive targets. These are targets that were only available for a limited time during specific dates from 2016 through 2017. You would need to kill the target in a single attempt or else you would fail the contract and they would be gone forever. Originally, these were only available for 48 hours according to the wiki, but it seems later in 2016 they decided to make the window larger. A novel concept in theory to make it feel like a real contract with a narrow time to eliminate your target. But when you remember that people have real lives outside of playing this game and aren't going to schedule their lives around it, because that's just silly, the idea really falls apart. This is where the big point of contention comes for this game, since this is content that most people will never play, like the widely marketed Gary Busey versus Gary Cole mission. I attempted maybe 1 or 2 of these when I had the game installed by chance before I gave the game a full shot in 2018. Once they are done, they're gone forever, with only a few being brought back in 2019 according to the wiki, but I believe those were in Hitman 2. A lot of people understandably criticize this as the game's content depreciating, and that it was really unreasonable to have to constantly check back in with this game. I personally never did many elusive targets because it's simply too much of an inconvenience to constantly have to keep either reinstalling this game or keep it installed when it's nearly 70 gigabytes. This is an even bigger problem in Hitman 2 when that game is almost 200, which is about 2/5 of my SSD. It's surprising that it took this long, but Hitman 2016 was actually the first game in the series to have DLC that wasn't just weapons. While both of these take place in the same locations already in the base game, they have been reworked or completely changed so they have a fun spin to them, like in Sapienza, where it is now a movie set and you need to kill the main actor. Base Sapienza was just a regular town in Italy with shops and a church and a large mansion, but now you have tons of movie props to mess around with to create accidents for your target to die to. Or the final mission of Patient Zero in Hokkaido, where your main target has infected himself with a bioweapon. So you can't approach them by normal means due to the bioweapon infection being incredibly contagious. And the longer you take to complete this mission and kill the target, the more people will become infected, which will then become additional targets you need to take out. And if you're not in a hazmat suit and they come into contact with you within a certain range, you will be infected too. Wow, IO really ahead of the times with the social distancing concept. I criticized the writing in the Absolution video for how it handled things like the ICA and 47 as a character. It's genuinely impressive that they were able to turn around the narrative so fast with just a single game. And I think it's because of how simplistic the game's story is, with a lot of things left up to your imagination in a show don't tell manner. It is also helped a lot by the mission briefings, with their motion graphics and typography. Whoever made these, good fucking job, because they are amazing and really sell this international spy thriller aesthetic that this game is going for. The dialogue has also taken a massive leap from Absolution when it comes to actual plot relevant characters talking. They perfectly nailed Diana and 47's dynamic in this game, and nothing really sells how powerful and scary the ICA is than in the final mission where you destroy the rogue ICA board member's replacement heart.
Elegant solution, 47. With sodas on the operating table, and no hope of getting a second right-sided heart in time, you have effectively killed him without laying a hand on him. This should be a clear message to anyone considering following in his footsteps.
Though the general voice acting of this game is where the limitations of time and budget really start to show. It's got the same issue that games like Oblivion have, with having so few voice actors that sometimes you'll go from one guy to the next and they'll have the same voice actor. Yuri Lowenthal is like half of the NPCs in this game. But if you're going to have to cut corners due to tight budget and deadlines, then the voice acting was the thing that was inevitably going to take the hit. Hitman 2016 released its first episode on March 11th and completed the first season with its 6th episode on October 31st. Like promised, they released a physical version of the game once the season was over in January 2017 as Hitman: The Complete First Season. The game would go on to score an 83 for PC, an 84 for the PlayStation 4, and an 85 for the Xbox One on Metacritic. IO had hoped their risky new strategy would pay off in getting more people through the door at launch with lower commitment costs, but it turned out not to be the case, and the physical version and completed bundles sold far more. We don't know the exact numbers of sales for this game, but we do know that the game underperformed expectations, as in March 2017, Square Enix would drop IO as one of its developers. Square thankfully didn't just drop IO on its head, they actually tried to secure them a new publisher for the company. President of Square Enix, Yosuke Matsuda, said that while he really liked the game and wanted to have IO continue to work on making a season 2 and 3, he thought it would be for the best if they made it under a different publisher, as the scale for investment would be quite challenging as it would conflict with resource allocations for other titles. News sites speculated that they were referring to the Avengers game, as it seemed like they were putting all of their eggs into that basket.
And oh boy, I hope that works out for them.
What the fuck? Whoa! 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 What the fuck?
This split with IO and Square Enix resulted in a $43 million loss for Square Enix, but in doing this management buyout, IO was able to keep the rights to Hitman as well as going independent. In an industry where it's commonplace for publishers to fuck over developers and then sit on an IP while doing nothing with it, or parade its corpse around in some sort of bastardized manner, it's really surprising and nice to see that Square took this route. As a result of this though, there was sadly another round of layoffs, but in April 2018, IO would announce that they were partnering with Warner Brothers and would release a definitive edition for the game. It's really sad that this game didn't seem to hit the mark that IO and Square really wanted and needed it to, but frankly, the deck was stacked against them. It may be anecdotal due to how small of a sample size, but it seems like when a series has a dud, especially if it widely varies from what came before it, even if the sequel that followed is amazing, said game will sell less than the critically panned title. They effectively poisoned the well, losing the trust and faith of fans. I was definitely one of them in this instance. It took me 2 years before I really gave this game a shot. But if this game proved anything, it showed that even with the staff coming and going, iconic faces leaving the company, the heart and spirit of Hitman lives on, carried by those who really care and put everything they have into their work. IO would take everything they had learned up until this point and try and give the complete package release another shot, hoping that this time around they would be able to secure the audience they knew this series was capable of. So in June of 2018, IO would announce their sequel to their underrated and misunderstood darling with Hitman 2. If you've made it this far into the video, I just want to say thanks for watching as always. If you really liked the video, please share it around because these Hitman videos usually do not get a lot of views. And if you really like the channel, maybe consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. All patrons get access to videos a day early, and I am now going to shout out my $5 and up patrons who really help support the channel. Bully, Comrade Fox, Tristan the White Wolf, Matthew Elliott, Dusty the Zombie, Filthy Finger 69, Clivermort, Fies, William Moore, Mr. Kill Jr., Tyler Schertzer, Some Panda, Poke Joke S, Joshua DiLarino, Chichomatrius, Ben Johnson, Sarah Chan, Oods of Nudes, Fish Kami, Joan Eisen, Alejandro Benitez, Flarbu, Star Fox, and Mitchell. Thanks so much, guys. If you want to keep up to date with what I'm going to be doing next, follow me on Twitter. And if you're a card game player of any kind, I have a TCG Player affiliate link in the description below. Any purchases you make using my link will give me a small kickback. So it's an easy and free way to further support the channel without really having to do anything. Tune in next week for the final episode of the Hitman Retrospective with Hitman 2. It's been a long journey and I'm excited for it to finally be finished. As always, thanks for watching and see you next time.